The transport vessel shuddered as it dropped from hyperspace, and Lyra gripped the armrest with her four-fingered hand. She had traveled across 17 star systems in her career as a xenobiologist, but nothing about this assignment felt right. Working with humans. The thought made her throat's sacs tighten. Humans were dangerous. Everyone knew it. They came from a death world where everything tried to kill them, and somehow they had thrived. They fought wars over abstract concepts, threw themselves into situations that would make any sensible species flee, and worst of all, they seemed to enjoy it. The Galactic Council had only granted them provisional membership 3 cycles ago, and already there were incidents. Bar fights. Territorial disputes. That mess on Station 47, where a human had punched through a reinforced viewport to save a drowning Aquarian child. Lyra had voted against their inclusion. She still believed she had been right out the research outpost on Korath Prime, materialized on the viewport as the transport began its descent. It was a lonely cluster of prefabricated structures on a jungle planet, surrounded by massive trees that stretched toward the violet sky. This world held secrets buried in its ancient ruins, remnants of a civilization that had vanished 1,000,000 years before any current species had discovered fire. Lyra was here to study their biological augmentation techniques. The human was here for security. She had protested the assignment. Director Venn had been unsympathetic. The Korath predators are aggressive and numerous, he had said, his crystalline features reflecting the office lights. We've lost 3 research teams in 2 years. Automated defenses aren't enough. You need someone who understands how to survive hostile environments. Then send a Thorian warrior or a Kelvin hunter, Lyra had argued. They're all assigned elsewhere. The human military has offered cooperation. Soldier Jack Rivers has extensive experience in jungle warfare and Xena protection. His record is exceptional. Lyra had seen that record. 17 successful missions. 0 casualties among protected personnel. Decorated for valor on 4 separate occasions. It was impressive, certainly, but it didn't change what he was. Humans were impulsive, violent, and worst of all, unpredictable. They operated on emotion rather than logic. How could anyone trust a creature like that to make rational decisions in a crisis? The transport landed with a gentle thump. Lyra gathered her equipment cases and made her way to the airlock, her tail twitching with anxiety. The humid air hit her like a wall when the door opened, and she paused at the top of the ramp, letting her respiratory system adjust. A figure waited at the bottom. He was tall by human standards, which made him average height for her species. He wore fitted combat gear in muted greens and browns, and his face was weathered in the way that spoke of years under harsh suns. His eyes were a startling blue, and they tracked her descent with a professional assessment that she found slightly unnerving. "Dr. Lyra," he said, and his voice was deeper than she had expected. "Welcome to Korath Prime. I'm Rivers." She descended the ramp carefully, keeping her movements formal and distant. "Soldier Rivers. I trust the facility is prepared for my arrival." "Yes, ma'am." "Lab equipment is set up per your specifications." "I've established a security perimeter around the main complex and the nearest ruins. Motion sensors, thermal scanners, and sonic deterrents are all active." Lyra nodded curtly. "I'll need access to Site 7 by tomorrow morning. The inscriptions there reference biological modification chambers. I've already scouted it. The path is clear, but there's a water crossing a ripwing's nest. We'll need to go around." He picked up 2 of her equipment cases as if they weighed nothing, which they definitely did not. "This way, Doctor." She followed him along a worn path through the facility. The main building was functional but sparse, clearly designed for utility rather than comfort. Rivers showed her to the laboratory first, and she had to admit he had been thorough. Every piece of equipment was exactly where she had requested it, properly calibrated and connected to the power grid. "I'll be in the security station if you need anything," Rivers said. "I've set up a communication link. 1 click for non-urgent contact, 3 clicks for immediate assistance. The system works anywhere within 5 kilometers of the complex." "I doubt I'll need to use it," Lyra said stiffly. "I'm quite capable of managing my own research." Something flickered across his face, but he simply nodded. "Of course, Doctor. Dinner is at 1900 hours if you're interested. I cook for myself, but I can prepare extra. I have my own provisions. Understood?" He set down the cases and left without another word. Lyra spent the rest of the day organizing her laboratory and reviewing her research notes. She tried not to think about the human in the security station, tried not to wonder what he was doing, or whether he was reliable. She reminded herself that she was here for the work, not to make friends with a member of a species that barely understood the concept of civilization. The first incident occurred 3 days later. Lyra was working at Site 7, carefully documenting a series of genetic transcription codes carved into an ancient wall, when her audio receptors picked up a sound. A low rumble like distant thunder, but the sky was clear. The rumble grew louder, closer. Her communicator clicked 3 times before she could reach for it. "Doctor, move away from the wall. Slowly. Don't run." Rivers' voice was calm, but carried an edge of absolute command. Lyra turned her head carefully, and her blood went cold. A Kareth beast stood at the edge of the clearing, easily 3 times her mass, with scales like armor plating and jaws that could crush stone. It was staring directly at her, its nostril slits flaring as it tested the air. "I can't move," she whispered into the communicator. "My leg is caught in the vines." A pause that lasted an eternity. Then, "I'm coming. Stay absolutely still." The Kareth took a step forward, then another. Lyra could see the muscles bunching under its scales, could see the way its eyes tracked her smallest movement. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew that was death. The Kareth were pursuit predators. Running triggered their hunting response. A shape materialized from the jungle to her left. Rivers moved like water, silent and fluid, circling around behind the creature. He had something in his hands. Not a weapon. A device of some kind. The Kareth's attention snapped toward him. It roared, a sound that vibrated through Lyra's chest cavity, and began to turn. Rivers pressed a button on the device, and a high-pitched tone filled the air. The Kareth froze, its head tilting in confusion. Rivers adjusted the frequency, and the creature took a step backward, shaking its massive head. In that moment of distraction, Rivers crossed the distance to Lyra in 3 long strides. He dropped to one knee, produced a blade from his belt, and cut through the vines with quick, efficient movements. His hands were steady. "When I say move, run for that fallen tree," he said quietly, pointing. "Get behind it and stay down." The sonic device was still emitting its tone, but the Kareth was adapting, growing accustomed to the sound. It took a step forward, then another, building momentum. "Move." Lyra ran. She heard Rivers behind her, heard the Kareth's roar of rage, heard the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. She dove behind the tree and rolled, turning just in time to see Rivers dodge the creature's charge with a matador's grace. He had abandoned the sonic device and now held something else. A shock baton, crackling with energy. The Kareth wheeled around, fast despite its size, and lunged. Rivers sidestepped again, but this time he struck, driving the baton into the soft tissue behind the creature's jaw. The Kareth convulsed and collapsed, unconscious but breathing. Rivers stood over it for a moment, chest heaving, then turned to Lyra. "Are you injured?" She realized she was trembling. No, I'm intact. He nodded and moved to check the carrot's vital signs. Professional, even now. It'll wake up in an hour with a headache. We should clear the area before then. He looked at her directly, and his expression was kind. Can you walk? Yes. She stood on shaking legs. You saved my life. That's the job, Doctor. He retrieved the sonic device and the pieces of cut vine, erasing evidence of their presence with practiced efficiency. Let's get you back to the facility. We can return tomorrow with better deterrence. They walked in silence for several minutes. Lyra's mind was racing, replaying what she had witnessed. The way Rivers had moved. The calculated risk he had taken to draw the creature's attention away from her. The steadiness of his hands when everything should have been chaos. You were afraid, she said finally. He glanced at her. Of course I was. That thing could have killed us both, but you didn't run. Neither did you. I was trapped. You still could have panicked. You stayed calm. That took courage. He smiled slightly. Maybe we're not so different, your species and mine. Lyra considered this. Considered everything she had believed about humans and their reckless nature. But what she had witnessed wasn't recklessness. It was controlled fear, channeled into action. It was bravery despite terror, not the absence of it. Perhaps, she said slowly, I was mistaken about some things. Rivers didn't gloat or press the point. He simply nodded and continued walking. Over the following weeks, Lyra found herself observing him more carefully. She noticed how he checked every piece of equipment twice, how he planned for contingencies, how he studied the local ecology as thoroughly as